Hey everyone, Tactics here with my second and last +10 route walkthrough of The War Within Season 1, where in this video I'll be taking you through a timed STONEVAULT run we did, kind of showing you some strategies we used throughout the key, as well as just some tips and tricks to help you with some of the dangerous trash pulls, as well as of course those bosses in this dungeon, and help your group get that Keystone Hero achievement. But similar videos just like this one for the rest of the dungeons in the season over on my channel. Plus, I am going to be dropping more in-depth coordinated route videos for like +12s and above and title route keys if you're trying to, push above with that pesky amp affix that happens at that 12 level. So if that is interesting to you, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Otherwise, let's get started here. We're off the top, of course, like we do in a lot of dungeons. We're doing a real big pull here with Bloodlust and all of our cooldowns. So we're actually going to go this whole first hallway, pulling 3 packs. And something I will do too as a tank, just to make my life a little bit easier. Sometimes it's hard to add a further pack you're trying to set up, especially your defensiveness and stuff like that. And so what I will do here, a lot of times, if there's like a far mob or a far pack that I want the group to pick up, a lot of times I will just ask my DPS to tag one of these mobs. And obviously in some cases, if a mob is a tank buster very quickly, that's not good. But in a case like this, it's perfectly fine for them to just tag. Like they end up tagging it and I end up death grouping at the same time. But this is a perfectly fine pack. Just have your group tag, and if my death in the K is down, I'm going to be blood boiling. I'll be able to get aggro before anyone else does. Pointing this frontal away, and basically the whole thing here is there's like, I think there's 1 void soul in this pack. So that is just the hard prio kick. You see, even has a marker on it. Make sure that fear gets kicked. Otherwise, Curse Dispels are just kind of ripping on CD. You see, boom, we had 2 curses go out just before this. We have a shaman and we have a mage that can Curse Dispel here, and so they are just ripping that Curse Dispel kind of on CD. The more Curse Dispels you have, obviously the less damage your group is going to take. We're now sitting here with 2 curses, but they have their Curse Dispel on CD, so we're just kind of waiting here for that to come back. You do want to be careful if you get this curse when that slam happens from the golem. It's kind of the most dangerous part, so that's potentially when you would want to use defensive. Otherwise, you're just going to be using spare notes on this Arcing Void. And the other thing some people don't realize is Arcing Void actually does a small amount of splash damage. So if you can spread out a little bit, like 8 yards apart, like range, for example, 1 over here, 1 over here, 1 over here, as an example, melee on one side of the pack, tank on the other, that can help reduce the damage of this Arcing Void by a lot, because then it doesn't jump to other players for any that do go off. And then from here, because we did lust that, we ended up killing this very fast, like much faster than we expected. And so we still have lust, so we chain and we do another double pull here. Again, this one's honestly not too dangerous. You could choose to take it slow here if you preferred. If you're not as comfortable, totally fine. That you could just do 1 pack, focus the little guys, then chain the other pack. You're gonna have 2 golems here, which means you're going to have 2 sets of those AoEs kind of desynced from each other. So you need to be aware of that damage intake. But in this case, we have, believe there's less curses in this pack, but there is an additional void soul here, so we do need to be kicking that guy. And that guy there, the 2 kicks assigned, that's the biggest thing for sure. And then spare kicks from then on can go into the invaders, and that's kind of the priority here. And you can see as a tank here, I'm just pointing these golems away from the group, so not hurting anybody. Same double golem pull, not a big deal. It is Void Emissary week, and I will say, once we threw a monk in our group, that affix was infinitely easier. It's a very, very annoying affix if you don't have a monk, but you can see basically with the Touch of Death, like CDR talents and stuff, it lines up for the Void Emissary, and they just do that to the Void Emissary every single time. So that's very hype. Very hype having a monk in your group this week. Big tech for those that don't know. And then we're going into the first boss here, and this is a boss I've seen a lot of confusion on, and I think it can make it much more difficult than it needs to be. So basically what I recommend do is just have your entire group stacked. So you can see we're all stacked up. The spikes are going to spawn. All the spikes are going to be in one spot. We're going to shimmy slightly. And now what we're going to do here is I, as the tank, am going to point my beam at these spikes to detonate them. Everyone else is going to fan out. What that does is it puts the extra damage, quote unquote, because what happens here is the beam deals damage and then the spikes deal dot damage once they detonate. So to make that as safe as possible, the tank detonating it is the play, because the tank taking a bit of a beam hit and then the dot damage ticking is not nearly as dangerous as if a DPS did it. Other players can do it. Doesn't need to be the tank. It's just the most safe for the tank to do it, because they're also defensiving at the same time here, because you're taking the tank buster just around this. Like if you pop a defensive here, for example, right, you'd be taking this this smash, you'll be taking this beam, and you'll be blowing up the crystals, which don't do any initial damage, but they have this dot, right? So that's what you're trying to kind of avoid. You can see everyone else just fanned out, so they didn't cleave their beams, and this just makes it really safe. You don't extend the dot in any way, because they're all getting broken at the exact same instant. You don't have to deal with multiple people coordinating positioning to make sure they're hitting the right number of pillars. And honestly, the damage is not that scary. As you can kind of see, that the healer can kind of plan around that damage intake, and it's kind of fine. Now, the other thing on this boss fight is the tank buster, because you just repeat this, copy and paste this, copy and paste. As you can see, we all stack back up. We drop all the spikes, move again, just copy and paste. The tank buster here, it's pretty scary. It does quite a bit of damage. You need to make sure you have some defensive coverage every single time as a tank. So for example, this first one comes out, my Vampla just ended, so I timed an Umbilicus for this, plus I'm in Lichborn. This is enough for me to survive this, and then I just Death Strike back up. Something small every time is what you need. You know, Bark Skin works great. Every single tank has enough CDs here to make sure you have coverage, some coverage for every single smash. And then there's also this extra little bonus here, where this dot, whenever it's dispelled, it actually gives you a short DR. So boom, 5 seconds of DR is what this buff is from that dispel. And so healers here, you want to be able to try and keep your tank as healthy as possible. So outside of the very first smash of the fight, what you can do is just always dispel this debuff right before a seismic smash. Once you see the seismic smash cast start, boom, dispel the tank, and that will last through this hit, and that gives them an extra boost of DR. That being said, I don't think it's required to have that DR as a tank at even a 10 level, but healers, that is something you can do to make your tank's life a little bit easier. As you can see though, it's just kind of copy pasting what I was telling you. We all stack up, drop all the spikes, we move a little bit, I point at the stack of spikes, everyone else fans out. From here, we're going to move towards the machinist area, doing this pack here. Nothing too crazy. This is all stuff we've mostly seen, except for there is a couple new guys here, but there's only one of them, so not too scary. The 4-chans, nasty damage taken stacking up on the tank. This is something a lot of tanks are going to be scared of in this wing. And then you have the actual speakers who have this tank buster, which also slows you. In a 2-pack, it's not too scary, but let's move on here, because there are like 6 of them in a pack later on, and we'll walk through that. So basically here, we're going to chain this double pull here, pull up the Forge Loader to give a big mob to hit. We are keeping kicks here on Menders whenever we can, just because it's random target damage. When whoever gets targeted by the Forge Loader is Mortar here, they're going to be in a bit of danger. They're going to probably want to pop a defensive if you get targeted by that, because that dot ticks quite hard, so make sure you are doing that. And then here's where we get into that spooky pull. So we are in a decent spot on this pull, and I have Rune Weapon up, which is why we end up chaining this. The other thing too, this entire pack is only tank damage, so that's kind of on me. Whenever I'm ready to pull this, that's when we're doing it. So boom, I pop Rune Weapon. You see I throw my Death and Decay down. I'm chaining my defensives here back to back to back as my stacks go up. I'm getting pretty lucky here actually initially, because of that Rune Weapon parry. I end up parrying a lot of them. What you can do also is chain things like AoE stuns to help drop your stacks mid-pull, but also as a DK here, what you're probably going to see me do at some point is just drop a new Death and Decay to slow these mobs, and then leave. Actually, no, they end up dying when I start getting high stacks. But if I was scared here, because I chained my CDs and they kind of died in my CDs, and I chained IBF at the end too, actually, so that's why actually I chained IBF at the end as soon as I started getting the high stacks. But if you started getting scared, say your IBF ran out or your big DR ran out, and these guys are still here, drop a CC, drop an AoE stun, a big AoE slow, a knockback, kite. That is unfortunately the reality for these mobs, these aspiring 4-chans. Whenever you do a big pull that has like 5 or 6 of them in it, and you start getting stacked up with this damage amp, kind of just need a kite when they get to high stacks. It's really the only thing you can do, unfortunately. I know it's not fun for a lot of people, but this is one of the few packs I would say where kiting is probably very likely to happen in this season. So keep that in mind. Do not be afraid to kite those mobs specifically. I do wait for my stacks to fall up before getting into this pack. Otherwise, it's pretty much copy paste, right? You keep kicks on the alloy bolts, and otherwise it's just a bunch of tank damage. And we're gonna go in here. We're gonna skip these double loaders because you saw those that one loader we pulled absolutely chunking, right? So we don't want to pull those guys. So we're just gonna jump over the edge here. You have a nice big pull. It is kind of scary to get into as a DK when I don't have rune weapon up, but it's not the end of the world here. Again, being careful of these forge hands. I'm going to be getting to my rune weapon very soon, and so I'm basically pushing all my other defensives to get me to that rune weapon. We use the leg sweep here as well, and that gets me to my rune weapon, and then the parry plus the leg sweep lets me reset my stacks in pack here, and then I can kind of chain to this corner. The reason we're pulling into this corner and not the other corner to open up the minecart is because this little block here, you can see, can be interacted with by, I think, dwarves, blacksmiths, and something else. Dwarves, blacksmiths, and something else. Can't remember off the top of my head. But that gives you a 10% versatility buff for 10 minutes. So this is a really nice buff to open up if your group is able to. And so we're just going to kill this pack, and then we're going to open that up to have that buff for, you know, the next 10 minutes of this dungeon, which is pretty nice. This next pull, we're just going to pull it around the corner. We're taking these 3 mobs, basically. There's injured earthen too, but they don't really do too much. And we're just pulling over here, and then you could drop into this corner to LOS those casters in if you needed to. We don't need to because there's a DK in the group, and I'm just going to grip them in. But if you didn't have like that kind of thing, you could just have everyone run around and LOS here, and then you wouldn't need kicks to get those mobs in. Otherwise, like, there's quite a few menders in this pull, so you can see we're doing AoE stops here to try and prevent too many of the random target casts from going off, or even the heals from going off. And then we're just kind of AoEing and getting kicks where we can, just to make sure it actually dies. And then we are getting up to the next boss here, which was pretty quick for this run, so we actually aren't going to have Lust on pull. This is kind of where you would usually, I would say, get a Bloodlust around this time, and you would use it on this boss, but we're very fast this run, so we're not going to have it. The focus here, of course, is making sure boss damage is split. Notice how the robot has more health than the small guy, so the robot needs a bit more damage. This is another one of those bosses I covered in my hardest bosses video, so I'm not going to go super hard on this boss. Keep interrupts on Speaker Brock if you can. Use 2 melee kicks while she's near you, and save a range kick for when she jumps away with Scrap Song. Note that for Scrap Song, she will always jump to the closest side. So because we're on this side of the map, she jumps over here. Our mage moves over slightly. Our mage is going to get that kick. If we were on the other side, Brock would jump to that side. So keep that in mind. The Speaker Brock always jumps to the closest side of the map, so that's where your range kick needs to be leading. Vents go out. Just make sure you're never on the active vent, and we just move slightly over to wherever the inactive vent is, just to avoid having to dodge all of these swirlies. Dorlita goes out to do the big thing. You stand directly on the vent you're on, or if you're somehow on a vent that is, or near the corner of the room that is active, when this happens, you get trapped over there, just stand right beside the vent. That is also safe. There's previously also a safe spot. People were stacking like literally right here, and apparently this was, at least a week ago when I last checked, safe, and you could stand in that spot, and it was completely safe from all abilities. You know, puddles wouldn't spawn over there. These waves wouldn't hit there for some reason. All you had to dodge was the frontal. I don't know if that spot still works, and I assume that if it does still work right now, it's likely going to be fixed, because that's the type of thing Blizzard doesn't like. But there was a bit of a safe spot that players were using over there. Otherwise, again, we're just keeping, you know, kicks on the boss. We're, you know, keeping 1 defensive on Igni's Hammer is pretty good no matter what. As long as you have 1 thing, it's kind of similar to the first boss. But I think Igni's Hammer is honestly a little bit less damage than the first boss. As long as you have like 1 defensive up, usually you are pretty fine. Lava Cannon, just a random targeting here. And again, we moved across the room, so you're going to see Brock goes to the one that's now closest to us on this side of the room. And again, we're always keeping melee kicks on Brock during the phase, and we have the 1 range kick saved. Otherwise, it's kind of this dance where we're kind of moving across to wherever the inactive vent is, just because that's kind of the safest part of the room, keeping damage even. Moving on, this is how we get to the minecart. So the minecart, you don't actually need any kind of CC. You can't just jump over. You need to be watching this patrol guy, this forge loader, because this guy is annoying. For example, if he's like right here, patrolling this way, when you get to here, you're better off just not using the skip at all, because it's not worth pulling this pack or pulling that forge loader in order to activate the skip. You would just run. We have a decent pad. He's padding away, and so we're just going to jump in. There's a few like securing CCs you can do, like Pararop, like Mind Suit, like Sap, like any threat, Imprison, that kind of thing. Anything like this, is just securing it, but you don't need this CC to actually get to this minecart. You can just hug this wall tightly and you are fine, assuming again that forge loader isn't patrolling in. But we have that CC, so we're just going to use it. But you can see our red paladin ran, and he's not that far behind us, so it's not a big deal if you do have a bad patrol and you just need to run. Here I just pause slightly to wait for some people, and then we end up chain pulling this to the next little 3-pack here. The big thing is the scary guys in this area are that one big guy who's channeling that AoE behind, the spoilers. These are the guys you want to make sure, hey, there is only one of these in the pull. If you wanted to do that first pull on its own, totally fine. You can do that. If you wanted to do this all together, this is also fine because there is only one despoiler. You should make sure you are keeping kicks on the 2 howlers specifically, and also a 3rd kick on the turn speaker is nice for the actual gear cast they have, because that can silence, especially if it targets your healer. A silence is very nasty. But that starts dying, and we move forward here. Need to be careful. I think we get owned by this elemental. You watch the floor. It's very hard to see, especially if your group has a lot of ground effects. We've got Healing Rain, Consecrate, and Death and Decay down, and I think we just eat the swirlies and die from the Void Touch elementals. So be careful. You can also kind of stack up as melee to bait those in one spot, so you have more of a safe spot. I think they're maybe a little spread out there, and that's what got them killed. But otherwise, just keep your eyes open for those swirlies. It can be quite scary, quite hard to see. You have more of the curse guys in this area as well, so keep your curse spells ready for this area. And then we're going this way. Oh, this is good. So we're going to this pack, and the key is to watch this patroller, because like I said, 1 despoiler per pack. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to get these 3 guys, but who wants to pull 3 mobs? So instead, we're going to tag these guys in the room. I get owned by LOS, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I just targeted the wrong mob. I was slightly out of range too. That's hype. And so it took much longer than I wanted. And these mobs kind of got in a little weirdly, but it's okay. We use, I use Death Grips and we use Ring of Peace to get everything in here. That's totally fine. But this is what we'd want to do. Again, this is probably a situation where I could have asked the DPS to pull that pack for me, and it wouldn't have been too bad, especially if they would just LOS on either side after that, and it would just come right into the pack. But again, this is a nice size pack now. It's not too dangerous. You have like a couple kicks from the 2 howlers here, and then you have the speakers as well, which you can put additional kicks into. This is, again, maybe something that has a few more kicks than your average pug group is okay with, so feel free to not do this if you're doing pug groups and you're not comfortable with the amount of kicks. But when you have a more coordinated group, 4 kicks, 4 people that have kicks, we have 5 people that have kicks even, not too bad. Then we just do the last spoiler with the last pack here on this side. For these spoilers, again, the Void Outburst is what you're really scared of, because there's a lot of heavy group damage when that happens. So that's kind of what healers should be aware of. And again, if you have a curse going into that Void Outburst, if you have, you're targeted by like the Arcing Void or stuff like that, that's when you would want to press a defensive on one of these pulls. Then we get into Scar Morak. And this is basically just managing the ads while also making sure that you get your buffs. This is something important. I know a lot of people didn't realize this was a mechanic, especially early on, but when this boss does I believe it's the Unstable Crash ability, it spawns a swirly under every player, and now on Mythic, those swirlies actually spawn an orb, and those orbs give you a 30-second buff that increases your damage to the boss's fortified shell specifically, but also increases your healing. So it's good to spread these buffs out and make sure you don't waste these buffs. These also are a dot, so you don't want to grab all of them on one player, for example. So again, a reason to kind of spread them out. And my general pug strategy is just, when Unstable Crash happens, soak your own orb. That will be perfectly fine. You will not have any issues if you do that. In fact, it'll probably help you out. It'll spread out the damage evenly across your group. It'll give you your healer a healing increase, and it gives all of your DPS in your tank a damage increase to the shield. So that is my general rule. For the smash, this is generally just on the tank to control and force your DPS to cleave things, basically. So obviously, if you're range, you're going to go and hit other things. You can't control that. But what I can control is what my melee do, because they're going to hit the boss, right? So by dragging this guy on top of shards, I can force them to cleave these shards, and I can make sure that, we're ideally not bursting 2 at the same time if we don't need to be, because that second stack can hurt quite a bit. You can see we're moving here to this next one. That one's getting cleaved. You can see all the swirlies spawn, and then these swirlies spawn orbs. And so again, I would just say, when this happens, just soak your own orb. that is my general recommendation for this. I end up just padding through another person's orb on my way to the shard, but that's okay. Not the end of the world. They just grab that one out there. We pad to the last shard. Next shards are spawning. So again, boom, right on top of us. We're going to go stand on here. We're going to kill this shard. We're going to go to the next one. We're going to kill this shard. Again, orb spawn. I recommend just soaking your own orb. You can see everyone soaking the orb. So I'm going to grab my orb. And we're going to cleave this shard. You can see we did leave a shard up. This is totally fine. If you have a shard just spawn super far away, like this one did, well, pretty much every other one was in this area here, it's not a big deal, especially with this strategy where everyone is actually getting their buffs. Because here's the thing, if you leave your orb on the ground for too long, they actually will despawn. So the first set of orbs that spawn despawn shortly after the second set spawn. So you want to make sure you were just kind of soaking it relatively quickly. You have this damage amp, and you can see even with one shard, even with two shards is also fine, by the way, assuming everyone has their buffs. The shield's not too big, so it's really not a big deal. It's a slight time increase, right? But you can see 9 seconds was the length of that shield with a shard up. So if you have a bad spawn on a shard, do not sweat it. Just keep hitting the boss and don't even bother pulling the boss out there. Don't even bother swapping to that one shard or two if they're two really, really bad ones. Just focus the boss, and as long as you have your damage amp, as long as your healer has their healing amp, you are totally fine. And if it gets really scary, right, if it gets over 10 seconds, 12, 15 seconds, maybe use a defensive, because there's really nothing else defensive on this boss. So if the shield starts getting long, use that defensive, especially if you had two of those guys up. Otherwise, really, it's just kind of rinse and repeat here, right? So the tank smash is going to go off. Of course, use a defensive for every tank smash. We're going to pull the boss over to shards. Boom, we're going to kill him. Then we're going just basically walking around the room, going shard to shard. Next shard. Boom. I think the boss is actually in a cast time here. That's why it's slow. And like I said, just kiting around the room, getting this shard. And like, I'm probably not going to go out here to this shard. It's very far away. It's not. It is not ideal. And the cast starts, and we're like, you know, it's fine. We don't need to kill that shard. It's not really a big deal. Boom. Boss gets a little bit of extra shield, but we're all buffed up. I only got one buff there because I was busy running around shards, but again, not a big deal. Shield's removed in 8 seconds, right? So that's just kind of rinse and repeat for that boss again. And we're going to the minecart here. Boom. And we're going to the last area, and this is where chaos reigns. So I probably didn't really fully communicate this to the group, but basically what my recommendation here is I pinged the spot. But basically, it's a whole lot easier if your entire group is aiming these honor guards into one specific area. And so my general recommendation here is to kind of use these guardrails as like a to force these mobs to not charge super far away. Like we saw the initial guys charged way out here. So you can have like your range here, or you can have your entire group on one side even, and you can bait the charges and then slowly move in one direction away. So for example, if we were all over here, stacked on one side of the pack, you could bait the charge, shift right, bait the next charge, shift right, bait the next charge, etc., etc. And that would keep all these guys locked down. There's a bit of a confusion here, and that's okay. And this is, again, more of a coordinated group thing. I think in general, if you're just baiting the charges, like if you pull the back to like here in the middle of this area, and then you bait charges either to this wall or to this wall, I think it's generally fine as well. But the goal was just to kind of reduce some of the confusion here. I think we still end up having someone eat a charge. It's just like, it just also, if they hit the wall here, their charge immediately ends, and it kind of makes it much easier to cleave. Like you can see how boom, boom, and just they stay in the pack almost. And that's kind of the goal here of that. Takes a little bit of setup, maybe a little bit more coordination than just hitting it. These guys, I think you want to make sure you pull these guys after you kill these Earth Burst totems. We're going to have a single totem go off here and get absolutely murdered. The casters, the Stone Shapers, not a big deal. They're specifically tank damage, right? So if your tank can survive, it doesn't really matter, though you do see one out here kind of hitting the healer. I grip him in. But this totem right here, I think, is the one that goes off. No, we get it, and then it's one in the pack. So with 4 of these guys, it's tough, and we end up getting murdered by that because this one spawned out of the group, and there was one out there as well. So because of that, it's problematic. You want to make sure you are prepared for that to happen. And honestly, if you want to just wait when this pull happens, because these Stone Shapers are relatively low HP. I mean, you can't just do this pack on its own. You can focus one Stone Cheaper and then you can chain this pull. The biggest thing is you just can't do the two Rock Smashers together, right? Which is why we're trying to do this for efficiency. But it goes a little wrong because the pack doesn't quite group up properly. And then we also, have the Void Emissary active at the same time, which you end up killing. And then there's just 4 totems. And then it's just, we almost got it. We were almost got it. But remember, they are actively totems, which is another thing I think maybe some people aren't aware of that. AoE spells don't work. You have to swap to them specifically to actually deal damage. They don't have a ton of HP, but you need to actively swap to them. So we end up dying here. And actually, I think this bull stays alive somehow and we end up killing it. But yeah, that is something to be aware of. Those totems are just going to murder you. If a totem is about to go off, you need to press an immediate defensive or you will likely just die. Might even die anyways. Last pack here, nothing too crazy. Then we go into the boss. And basically, this boss is all about your dot and making sure you are managing your dot and clearing it as quickly as possible. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a range in our comp because we have 2 range and 2 melee. Range, you can see pre-positioned to the portals. Void Corruption is going to go out. They're going to instant clear. Boom. And now melee can go clear their portals whenever they deem fit. And then I wait to the very end as the tank, and then I clear. And that, again, like a lot of the bosses in this dungeon, I guess, copy-paste from then on. Every time in 13 seconds, the next dot is going out, so the range are going to make their way over towards these next portals by that 13-second mark, and they're going to instantly clear, and then the melee will clear, and then I will clear, and then it's going to be good. See, the range is already kind of making their way over there, right? They're kind of moving over, and that's kind of how you're going to handle those dots. Now, handling these puddles, you can see, people are placing these at the edge of the room. I'm placing it on top of an existing puddle. What's going on here? Well, puddles don't deal too much ticking damage. If you're tanky, if you already have a defensive running from something else, you can just stack it on one spot infinitely, which is what I do. In basically the kind of middle-ish area of the room, I just keep dropping it in the same spot, same spot. Tank is not too hard. The other thing, though, is that the rifts, remember, you're not trying to go inside the rift. You just need to get within like 10 yards, I believe, of that rift or something like that, and that will actually cleanse your buff. So you don't need this space on the edge of the room. This space on the edge of the room where the rifts go, if you push it against the wall, you can still get in range of the rift to cleanse your debuff without touching this puddle. And so pushing these puddles on the edge of the room is actually very good because it conserves a lot of space. You can see there's a puddle here, but you can see the portal is actually up front of the puddle. Actually, someone instantly cleared it too. Yeah, actually, yeah, we have debuffs right now. So one of the melee instantly is clearing this one. Boom. They don't need to get anywhere near the puddle. So dropping your puddles along the edge of the room, assuming you're touching the wall, is a good thing to do. So make sure you are doing that if you are able to. Melee, range, whatever. That is a good spot to do it. Also, you can see I'm, again, stacking in the middle of the room, and we have so much space now to run around. We kind of have this giant circle. Honestly, I probably could be off-center a bit or could be dropping towards the edge of the room over and over again. Don't need to be in the middle of the room. Keep the middle of the room totally clear. It's probably better, to be honest with you. But chain dropping on the edge of the room, very, very good. Conserves you a ton of space. So do that if you can. And again, just managing the dot from there. Because if you hold this dot for even 10 seconds as a DPSer, you're kind of in danger. As a tank, it's not a big deal because there's no other tank damage on this fight. But for everyone else, you want to make sure that you are clearing relatively quickly here. And that's kind of why the tank is okay kind of hanging out, with that dot. Not nearly as scary, but everyone else quite a bit scary. So that is kind of this boss, and that is kind of this dungeon. So hopefully this video helps you and your group out in STONEVAULT. And if it does, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content like it. Otherwise, shout out to my Patreons for their continued support. And I'll see everyone in the next video.